It's hard to believe, but after the checkered flag during last Sunday's Dixie Vodka 400, we are 1/3 of the way to crowning a champion in Phoenix. And once again, there have been some great surprises and disappointments early on in this NASCAR Cup Series season. One driver in the latter happens to be our defending champion Kyle Busch. He has remained socially distant from victory lane, and it makes you wonder, is Kyle Busch really still stuck in quarantine? Because undoubtedly, this is not the Kyle Busch that we've seen in the past. Fortunately, having watched Kyle Busch closely since Daytona, I'll talk about why he struggled to compete, and whether he, Adam Stevens, and the 18 team can re-emerge as championship contenders. Kyle Busch struggling to compete is coming right up. So, to jot your memory, we must first flash back to 2019. The early portion of the season was a time where you couldn't go more than 15 seconds without hearing Kyle Busch, completely dominating trucks at Xfinity, winning number 200, his consistency in the regular season. It was the Kyle Busch show and we were merely living in it. But then came the final 2/3 of the season. Kyle Busch went largely under the radar and went on a 21 race winless streak that led to a lot less laps led compared to his hot start. And this was all while Denny Hamlin and MTJ were winning races, and they looked substantially better than the 18 team. In no way, shape, or form did the M&M's team look even on point with those other two teams. But in typical Kyle Busch fashion, he saved his best stuff for the very end. Much like 2015, Adam Stevens and crew took control of the Ford 400 and won championship number 2. Considering his rather mediocre playoffs, it definitely caught a lot of people off guard. Except for one YouTuber who's actually a pretty good master predictor if I say so myself. Going into 2020, I definitely expected Kyle Busch to do more Kyle Busch-like things, and definitely carry the momentum from hoisting the silver prize. Plus, much like the previous season, you have the same competitive core. And you also have to keep in mind there were changes on the 19 team, which would mean that they would take a little bit of a step back. What has ensued instead has been 4 wins for the Joe Gibbs Racing team, none of which coming from the driver born and raised in Las Vegas, Nevada. And having watched all 12 races this season, Kyle Busch has looked substantially off both performance-wise and on the stat sheet. I mean, of course you have the elephant in the room, no wins so far to start this season. But another thing is, he hasn't even won any stages yet so far. If the playoffs started today, Kyle Busch would carry 2 playoff points from his 9th place finish in the regular season standings. That's the same amount as Clint Bowyer, a rather average driver on a fairly lopsided organization. Yeah, those numbers aren't very good. And then you just look at the laps he's led this year, it's a pretty substantial decline. Just looking at these numbers closely, these are numbers I'd expect to see from his brother. These type of numbers might result in a win or 2 and likely a round of 8 appearance, but in the end, these are not championship numbers, and the performance is far from the likes of Harvick, Logano, etc. so far. I mean, just look at some of his races like Auto Club, Darlington, and Phoenix. He finished in the top 5, but no one really thought that he had a car capable of winning the race. So at the end of the day, what is preventing Kyle Busch from competing for wins and becoming a championship contender once again? The first thing to note is that Kyle Busch has had quite a bit of speeding penalties this early into the season. Fortunately, Kyle Busch has knocked off a bit of the rust on pit road, and he shouldn't have as many issues going forward. This second thing may come off as a bit of a shock, but his restarts haven't been as elite. The first time I noticed this was the Alsco 500, as I saw some very unconventional Kyle Busch-like things during a mid-race restart. He was taken 3 wide by Ricky Stenhouse Jr., which put him in the dreaded middle going into the first lap. And as we all know, it cut his tire, Kyle Busch is forced to pit under green, he goes many laps down and finishes a dreadful 29th at the end of the day. And just compare that to his glory starts, where he completely separated himself from the pack heading into turn 1. The races where the Geico restart zone would become the perils of his other 39 competitors. And I would say the aero package is definitely the main culprit from this. As we've seen during a lot of the intermediate tracks, getting a good push is critical to having a good restart. I mean, there were probably some good instances where Kyle Busch got a good restart, but at the end of the day, the other line just got a better acceleration. And pretty much from there, he was screwed from getting the launch and taking the lead and getting more competitive opportunities to win races. And tying into the new aero package, it's been evident this season that Toyota has lost their edge over the competition. These issues were brought to light by Denny Hamlin right after the races in the Queen City. The current Toyota Camry body was designed prior to the 2017 season. And you've got to remember, this was a time where aerodynamics were critical and you wanted the nose to be as pointed as possible. Since then, NASCAR has adopted the new low horsepower, high downforce package, with both Ford and Chevrolet accommodating their bodies to that new package. And this is all while Toyota, for the most part, hasn't altered their model in any way, shape, or form. It also doesn't help that if you go back to last year, it was an all-in year for Joe Gibbs Racing. The 11, 18, and 19 teams all went to Miami with a shot of hoisting the silver prize. Meanwhile, the powerhouses at Hendrick, Penske, and Stewart-Haas did their homework, got ahead for 2020, and that's why Joe Gibbs doesn't look like the powerhouse that won 19 races last season. But of course, Denny Hamlin has the most wins this season, and Martin Truex Jr. won a race. So what is really separating Kyle Busch from those other two drivers in winning races and looking fairly competitive compared to the rest of the field? From what I've gathered, the new COVID-19 procedures have definitely been a benefactor to Kyle Busch and the performance of this 18 team. Since NASCAR's came back from the pandemic, there's been no practice at all, and qualifying has mostly been done by a random draw, of course besides the Charlotte 600. Essentially, that means the setup you load off the truck is what you're going to race for the better part of the first stage. And because of that, Kyle Busch has suffered. Just take a look at Martinsville last Wednesday night. Strong car, solidly in the top 5 halfway to the competition caution. Then as the long haul kicks in, you can definitely tell they missed the setup. By the time the competition caution came out at lap 60, Kyle Busch was scored 25th, 1 lap off the incredible pace Joey Logano was setting. And because of that poor start, Kyle Busch got behind. He actually ended up puncturing the nose to his car and never got his lap back because the race went under green most of the way. This has indicated that the true strength of this 18 team is having the ample time to properly set up and fine-tune the cars during practice. And unfortunately, or probably fortunately for a majority of NASCAR's fan base, there won't be any practice of any kind at least for the next month and a half. So honestly, right at this moment, I don't have Kyle Busch as someone that can compete for the championship and win it in Phoenix, even as it's one of his better tracks. But before I jump to conclusions, you gotta think there's still a lot of time for things to get better. After all, some of Kyle Busch's better tracks are coming up in the summer portion of the tour. You have the doubleheader at Pocono, you have the famed Yard of Bricks at Indy, you have Kentucky, and then you have the beloved Furco Motor Speedway. If the team can do a better job getting the setups right off the truck and they can put themselves in the top 5 at the end of these stages, then certainly that'll give them a good opportunity to sneak up and win these races because of the insane talent of Kyle Busch. Most certainly, I'd expect Kyle Busch to get a win by the next month. After all, it's hard to keep a championship team like that down for so long. I'd say, unless we're going into Kansas with Kyle Busch still winless, there's no reason for the team and his fans alike to panic just yet. So anyways, this is NRF signing out, and just remember, life's a beach and then you drive.